to kick off with just a little introduction. My name's Kirstie Kelly. I'm part of the RL100 gang. I'm on the Leadership Council. And more importantly, I really care about workforce well-being. And to that end, I've supported Jamie Leonard. Those of you who don't know who he is, he's the clever chap that created RecFest and all the other events that are part of the Recruitment Event Company stable. And I've been helping him scale his business and think about how he does that without having a negative impact on his team or on himself. So when Jamie said to me that he was going to be trialing a 4-day week, I was really interested to see not just how it landed in the industry, but also understand the impact for his team and see whether it's something that really could fly, because just from my first piece of research, a lot of corporate companies were saying it just wouldn't work for them. So that's what I'm up here to do. I've got about half an hour to do that with quite an interesting video at the end, which are the real insights from the people that it's affected. But today, I guess I'm just a storyteller, a bit of a journalist, and I wanted to share Jamie's experience and the experience for his business. And we've done quite a lot of research to see whether the 4-day week is really something that could fly for businesses, or is it just something for small startups who can afford to be a little bit creative. So we've done a lot of research to see what type of businesses are doing it, what are the facts around whether it works, whether it doesn't, and what can be the implications of implementing it. Is it simply something that can be a flag wave to encourage people to come and work for you? I don't know whether, as Bill said, whether you've seen the videos that Jamie's been posting on LinkedIn each week. And so he's been very brave. He's trialing it, and he's also sharing with the world his anxieties about it working or not working. So every Friday when the team are off having fun, he's been telling people how he feels about the experience, which I think is really brave. So we've really listened to the hype. We've thought about the effect it's had on the CEO. We've listened to the team, and I've talked to many other people in the industry to see how they've felt this has landed for a business such as the Recruitment Events Company. So my first question to Jamie was, is this just something you've done on a whim? Is it something you've really thought through? And we had this conversation. He explained that the business he's running as an event company is effectively as stressful as an emergency service. They're not the fourth emergency service, though today if they're serving beer, then you could argue that they are. So it's stressful. It is full on when an event is happening, and the impact for the people that work there typically is that they burn out really fast. And Jamie was very aware that he'd been running his business for a number of years. He had the same team. How could he put measures in place that would avoid them either burning out or leaving him? He wanted to be extremely honest about the whole experience. He wanted to be absolutely sure that this wasn't something he was doing on a whim. And I wanted to know really why do it? So beyond hiring people because they want to work less hours, what really was in it for the organization and how could they measure the impact? We looked at the facts. And if you do want to look back on the videos that he posted, I would encourage you to do that. But we started out by looking at the hard facts. And the facts really speak for themselves in that organizations have measured productivity decline after 35 hours of working, which I found astounding because certainly in the 80s and 90s, the perception was that you started to be productive after 35 hours. 35 hours of work and then your productivity declines. And if you talk to the Recruitment Event Company, in the old days, they were working considerably more than 35 hours. If anybody's worked in hospitality, events, in the public sector, they'll know that it's unlikely they would work less than 35 hours. I find this fact really most frightening when you think about the health service. If productivity declines after 35 hours and your operation is on hour 85, are you sure they're going to chop the right leg off? Possibly not the right thing to say, but you get my point. So the facts were really starting to stack up in that there was a big risk for an organisation that were working in a pressurised environment, but also that they were going to be less effective anyway. But I wanted to know what the positive implications of putting this in place was. And some more facts for you are that productivity increases from a 4-day week. And there's one particular organisation in Australia who had their 4-day week covered in the media heavily, very excited that they had cancelled a Wednesday, but they actually showed productivity and profitability increase. So suddenly we had Jamie's attention. Not only was he going to keep his team and they weren't going to burn out, he was going to make more money. That's a really cool thing to sell into the business, but also to really test when we're running this piece of research. So I dug a little deeper because I wondered whether this was really the case. It was all hearts and flowers, everybody would be happy, and you wouldn't be interrupted on your 4th day. And that's where I started to see some really interesting research about toxic subcultures. So have any of you, let me see whether any of you nod sagely. So you're given a benefit at work, a ping pong table in the corner, the chance to have free lunches, and the moment you step towards it to lift your bat and somebody wags their finger at you and says, have you pushed in that report, have you made that last placement? There are actually more smiling faces now than I thought. But what I saw was that the whole issue around presenteeism, and I'm sure you all know what presenteeism, well, that's that awful time when you sit at your desk and you know you're not productive, but you can't get up and leave because somebody will give you that Vulcan death stare as you walk out of the office. But this whole issue around presenteeism was really quite an issue. What if we have the 4-day week, but really if a client calls me on a Friday, I have to take that call? What if the boss emails me outside of work hours? I have to take that email. And I found that in organizations in Tesla, when an employee at Tesla asked when he was allowed to see his family, Elon Musk questioned his credibility and questioned his commitment. Can you imagine that sort of subculture proliferating what Jamie wanted to do, which was give people a benefit in kind? The second thing we found, when we asked the market what they thought about the 4-day week, their perception was that it was a cost saving and that actually he was dropping their salaries to 4 days a week, not that he was retaining their salaries at 5 days and that this was a gift to them. Conversely, I'm talking about toxic subcultures, but not always are benefits of this type well received by the employee base. And in one organisation that had a hot desking policy, you can sit anywhere, you can change your desk, you can be quite agile. Actually, the research from that organisation was that the employees hated it. When you actually investigated, they didn't have enough desks, and so if you were last in the office, you didn't have anywhere to sit. And this was an issue, I believe, for IBM, who had flexible working policy in place. They reduced the size of their offices. Well, you had to work flexibly because there was nowhere for you to sit. Just imagine how demotivating it would be for you to not feel that you were part of the team or important. And I've seen that myself with businesses that don't have enough parking spaces. Have you ever tried to wedge your car into that last space? So I was starting to see that there were some real issues that this subculture could interfere with a well-intentioned initiative. And so I wanted to really get under the skin of that when I interviewed the team themselves. But of course you interview the team, and what if the first question they ask is, how is that going to affect my job? So I'll hold that thought, because the video at the end will ratify that, or we've just exposed a toxic culture. I wouldn't be on stage if that were the case. So then I wanted to look at organisations that were less typical who have introduced some kind of flexible working, those that you would least expect it. Another supposition that was presented to me was, well, if you're in a sales organisation, you simply can't work 4 days. What if your customer calls? In the consulting world, in Accenture, for example, if a client wants you to deliver on a project and it's in 24 hours' time, you just work. Now, I was really interested to see that the Met Police have introduced part-time working, and for me, I thought that was really interesting because, of course, they're not going to leave the streets unprotected for the days that those individuals are off. That's a bigger conversation, but they have mapped their work patterns, and as a result, they're offering employment to people that otherwise wouldn't have thought about a career in the public sector. The civil service, interestingly, are probably the greatest champions of flexible working. And the facts, again, stack up as to why this is really important. So 73% of all UK workers are working either flexibly or part-time. So if you don't start to think about creative ways to employ people and different work patterns, you're missing out on 3/4 of the talent market. Well, that's language that we can all understand. More importantly, though, between about 8 out of 10 small businesses are offering flexible working. And so we know that it's more attractive to go and work for a startup organisation, but all of the talent is going to be heading in that direction if corporate organisations don't look at it too. Okay, so where did we go from here? We wanted to ratify that it wasn't going to just be a gimmick, and so we asked the opinions of those who are associated with the recruitment event company. Has it had an impact for their customers? And we were delighted to see that actually they were very, very accessible. Now, there are times when you will be able to get somebody from the organisation on the phone on a Friday, but what they chose to do was be very public about the way they were spending their day off, and it became a thing. It became a topic of conversation. And so rather than saying, well, who did you upset on that fifth day, they started to talk openly about the value they were gaining for their lives. And that if you follow any of the team on Facebook or on Instagram especially, you'll see how they spend their time. It was a really positive initiative. So what else? What else did we expose when we talked to people in the wider RL100 network about the impact? We wanted to learn what advice they would give about implementing a change. You know, this could be the 4-day week, but what about any other change in a corporate organisation especially? I know that RL100 and the Recruitment Events Company are only a small team, but how are you going to benefit from this sort of initiative at scale? And there were a couple of lessons learned. I've written them down because I don't want to miss them. So the first lesson that was learned was that it's important to have a deeper purpose. I want you to really hear Jamie's video. I asked him to think very carefully about why this mattered to him. Was this a gimmick, as I said before, or was this something that was radically going to change the well-being of his workforce? And he shared some really, really interesting stuff that he probably wouldn't have shared before if we hadn't poked a video in his face. So have a deeper purpose. Make sure that your reason for doing it isn't just a gimmick. The second was that really lab testing, which is what we've done with this piece of research, exposes some quite unusual benefits and challenges that sat down at a desk ahead of it being launched we would never have guessed. Be brave and test things, but be fast to decide if it's failing. talk about it. So one of the lessons that personally I've learned, and I think those in Jamie's network have learned, is that sharing the warts and all story of doing something differently has helped him, because his clients are seeing that it isn't all smooth running, so they're more open to tell him what's working and what isn't. But also a little bit of vulnerability is a really fabulous thing. What I noticed when we were researching, anything written about the 4-day week was a positive rah-rah from a CEO about how well it was working. I don't think Elon Musk had written a piece about toxic culture. So talking about a change, whether that's internally or externally if your brand allows, is a really important thing. I think one of the biggest learnings for me was that a simple, subtle change can have a really big impact. And when you hear the team talking, I think it's actually been radical for the whole organisation, far beyond just giving them some extra time back. Of course, it's all about communicating it, and I think the team will agree that perhaps it happened quite fast, but exposing internally what you're planning is a really important part of any change. I mean, that shouldn't be news to you, but often changes are made without any kind of pre-preparation. So communicate. And of course, in a bigger company, then some kind of agile working should be easier to implement, because you can overlay shift patterns. And it's really important then you sit down with your HR teams and think about how you can make sure there are no gaps in service. What I'm describing are the good sort of practices of any kind of change, let alone the 4-day week. So I think I'm getting close to being able to show you the video, and really what we found was that well-being was at the core of this initiative. And I guess the big question at the end is whether or not Jamie has chosen to continue it or not. So see what they say. I'm going to hit the button and listen to Jamie.
Hey, it's Jamie from the Recruitment Events Co, and Kirstie Kelly has asked me to do a quick intro as part of her video. So we're a little bit short on time. It's RecFest, we're on site at the moment, and just thought I'd do it sort of camera facing forward. Also, there's maybe going to be some noise because we're underneath an airport. So Kirstie asked me why we started this 4-day week, and I told this story at the Innovation Circus recently, and Kirstie said you should do that as an intro. So quick, like abridged version. So we started the 4-day week thing because we absolutely understand about well-being, and I understand about well-being because I've suffered from anxiety my entire life. Difficult thing to say on camera, difficult thing to watch yourself saying, because it's not a manly thing to do, right? So we have these kind of terms that we throw about as kids and even as adults, man up, stop being such a girl. What are you anxious about? And that last one's one of my absolute favorites. What have you got to be anxious about? Why are you panicking? And people don't know. And unless you've been in that situation where you suffer from anxiety or panic attacks, they don't know. Anxiety is like a tripwire. It can happen at any time, anywhere, and there's no rational reason behind it. For me, it started when I was at Monster, and I love Monster to bits, an amazing company. They were at the time a very hard-nosed, aggressive sales company, and one in places where if you didn't hit your target, you were going to get a bollocking from your boss. So that generated a lot of anxiety within me. And one day I walked into work after being out for a night out and just hit the deck in the middle of their reception area and woke up with an ECG attached to my chest. I was in an ambulance with one of our customer service guys, and they was like, this is a panic attack. It's not a heart attack, it's a panic attack. And from then on in, I've suffered from anxiety pretty much up to the age of about 30, where I met my wife and finally had someone to talk to about this, and let the crazy out to a certain extent. I never really spoke about it to anyone because it sounds crazy. You start panicking for absolutely no reason. That sounds ridiculous. That there is no rationale behind it. And spoke to my wife and told her about it, and we started to work through it together. And since then, I wouldn't say I'm cleared of it. It's not. It's kind of like alcoholism, right? You don't ever get clear of anxiety. You manage it better. And because of that, and knowing that, and knowing that we work in an industry that is so pressurized. If you look at Forbes' most pressurized jobs, it's like the army, the fire brigade, the police, and event organisers. You know, so these people get stabbed, these are people that set on fire, and then there's what we do. So, you know, knowing that and knowing how quickly it is to burn out. Sorry, there's a plane going over. Okay, not so loud. Knowing how it's easy to burn out in this, we wanted to give our team the best chance. We want to keep our team. We have the best team in the world. Our team are superheroes. They do incredible stuff. And for a team so small, we punch very, very big. We're about to put on a 3,000 person festival, and we work 4 days a week. That's pretty badass. So, you know, that's why we decided when we saw a few companies, not so much in the UK, but overseas, trying this 4-day week thing, that, you know what? Let's give it a go. If we can prolong keeping our staff, if we can make their lives better, then, you know, why not do that? As an employer, you are champions of their happiness. That's what you are as an employer to your team. You know, people work 8 hours a day. If they're having a shit time at work, their lives are probably going to be shit. So you have that responsibility. And if you can make it better, why not do it? Our team are doing some amazing stuff. I'll let Kirstie tell you without any spoilers. But yeah, that's my story. You'll see me knocking around. This ain't a sob story by any stretch of the imagination. We are killing it right now.
Curious.
Excitement.
Excitement.
Surprise and excitement.
I was massively excited about it.
2 reactions really. I think the first one was 52 extra days holiday for the same money. Not too shabby for Jonesy. Second one was probably, how's Jamie going to feel about working these extra hours?
So after 6 months, I think I've grown on the idea. At the beginning, I was very scared about it. In the first months, I wasn't all that keen on the idea of a 4-day week, but I think the 6 months we've totally proven that it is true that we will become more productive when you work a day less. And I think all of us individually and as a team, we've all proved it. So I'm loving it now.
It's not so scary. You know, I think time is a wonderful thing when you've got it. And I think, you know, working smarter rather than harder, having more open kind of forms of communication. We have a very agile team, so, you know, it's very easy for people to cover each other's jobs.
I think what the 4-day work week really did was it kind of forced you into a position to adapt to your working lifestyle.
There was clarity, a lot of clarity and kind of clear thought in terms of what do I need to do at this very moment. You know, there's that drive to have everything finished by Thursday.
I think I've learned to use my time way more efficiently. Where I used to maybe do lots of tasks at once and never complete one particular thing, now I've kind of been forced to learn that you need to complete a task before moving on to another one, and I just think I'm using my time way more efficiently.
I think hugely, it's hugely impacted me. So, for example, previously I'd have a weekend and the whole Saturday I'd waste away because I was just recovering, chilling out, decompressing from the week. Whereas now, I get that Friday to decompress, and it gives me the rest of the weekend to actually focus on bettering myself through development and also seeing family and friends.
Yeah, I think the impact for me specifically was just balancing plates, you know, trying to juggle things throughout the course of your, you know, professional career and your personal life is difficult sometimes. So just having an extra day where you get the headspace to go away and actually think, and not just action.
So I think the 4-day work week has changed my work and life balance more than what I could have initially expected. So I personally think that to deliver a better 4-day week, would have been better to go into it slower. I think from one day to another, going from a 5-day week to a 4-day week was a bigger change. I think if I were probably looking back on it now, and if I had to do this again, I'd move into it slower, being maybe starting with a 4.5-day week and then taking hours off until we were used to working less hours.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, and certainly from a personal perspective, I can't see anything that would have had a bigger impact than this. I was a firm believer in it. I've been kind of driving this conversation and really, you know, embodied it. And I think there's so much other organisations can learn from it. Of course it can't work in every single industry, of course it can't work in every single environment, but where it can, it should absolutely be utilised.
What would, if you were to start a 4-day week, what would have delivered you a better result?
3-day week.
So I think the video for me stacks up that the 4-day week was a roaring success for Jamie and the team. It is something that'll be continuing. And as Jamie put it so eloquently, you're governing your workforce's happiness and satisfaction. So I suggest you pitch it to your businesses today. We've written a white paper which we'll share with you just with a little bit more of the research, but thank you for listening.